Yeah. So I got to start off with this question because, 9/11, it's one of those moments in American history where we all think about where we were when it happens. And I was wondering if you mind sharing your story about when, where you were when you heard about the attacks.
Well, I was in my apartment in Manhattan. I just moved to the city 5 years ago, so I considered myself a New Yorker, but nobody else did. It takes a while for them to actually consider you to be, part of the city. I was about the apartment at the time was about 4 miles away, so I was in town. Um, it turns out that I was in a roommate situation at that time, and one of the guys that I was living with was down at the base of the towers. We feared that we had lost him. All that day, we waited for him to come home. Couldn't get in touch with him because all the phone lines were down. The cell phone towers had been eradicated. He stumbled in, I think it was around 5 p.m., totally covered in dust. He had a suit on. He was going to his job at the time down there. We sat him down, put a drink in his hand, and began to debrief him to try and calm him down. That's probably why I wrote the book in the first place, to be quite honest with you, is because I realized that as I was talking to him, somebody ought to be writing this stuff down.
Mm.
So what I began to do then is I started going outside and just talking to people as a way of giving myself to do something to do. And then I would hear stories from police officers and volunteers and firemen. And then what happened is somebody would say, well, if you think this story is great, you ought to talk to my friend. He's a paramedic. I would talk to the paramedic and he'd say, well, if you think this is interesting, you ought to talk to my friend. He's a homicide detective with NYPD. They're investigating the whole thing as a 3,000 person strong homicide. And so the web of people that I got a chance to talk to grew rather organically and very quickly. And for the next 18 months, I was running around we had micro cassette recorders at that time. We didn't have any digital. I was using tape and interviewing people and transcribing it and getting it all down. I mean, that was a tremendous privilege. So